Hi there, welcome to Sewing Quarter. I am Victoria Peat. It is fabulous to have you with us today. In this session, I have got the opportunity to talk to you about what I'm up to, some of the patterns that I have, and what I'll be up to in the future. So yeah, thanks for joining us. It's great to see you. So what I'm up to at the moment, well, if you're not aware, I'm living in Gibraltar at the moment, which is very exciting. And don't tell my husband, but it's better than I thought it would be. The weather's quite nice and we're kind of settling in and the children are okay. So yeah, it's nice, it's good. And the nice thing is that I'm having an opportunity to work on some of my own things. Rather than just running around like a complete and utter mad woman. So today I'm going to talk you through some of these patterns that I have, but I also have for you something exclusive. What I'll have is a copy of this pattern will be available if you sign up for my newsletter. If you've already signed up for my newsletter, don't panic. Just drop me an email and I'll be more than happy to send you a copy of that. Oh, the email here, or have a look at the website. My website is littleblackduck.co.uk, but there's a link on my Facebook page or a link through on my Instagram as well. So if you click on there, that will take you through to somewhere where you can sign up for the newsletter. So that will be a completely free pattern. So I'm going to show you how to do that, and that's foundation paper piecing. So I'll take you back to basics and show you how to do that. But in terms of what I'm up to at the moment, I don't know if you've heard of Arena Travel and Stitchtopia, but they do all these fabulous stitching holidays. Mandy Shaw hosts quite a few of them, and I've been lucky enough to be offered the opportunity to host a little trip away. So at the end of April, towards the end of April, I'll be going to Nantes on a stitching holiday. And it's going to be fab. It's a week long. We're flying in and out of London, and we're going to go to a quilting exhibition, a little bit like the Festival of Quilts, but on a slightly smaller scale, called Pour l'amour du fil, which will be fabulous, so a bit of shopping. We're also going to go to somewhere called Cholet, which I'm not sure if I've pronounced it correctly or not, but there's a fabulous looking textile museum. So we'll go there for a nice guided tour. There will also be a little trip to a vineyard, but don't let that sway you in any way, shape or form. And there will also be a tour of Nantes. And on top of that, we'll do all of that. I'll also be doing a couple of stitching workshops over the course of, I think it's 3 different days. I'll be doing stitching workshops. So if you fancy that, you're thinking in the new year, what on earth am I going to do with myself? Then come along, Stitchtopia. Have a look on my website or on the Stitchtopia website, and you'll see the details of the breakdown on what we're doing on each of the days and where we're going. But failing that, drop me a mail and I'll let you know what we're up to. The only thing to bear in mind though is that the cut-off date for booking that is the 10th of January. So just depending on when you're thinking of booking, just bear that in mind, that the last date for those is the 10th of January. Right, okay, in terms of some patterns that I've got, because we're going to talk about foundation paper piecing today, I thought I'd bring a couple of pieces along with me. First of all, we've got this one. This one is called Facets of the Heart. And this is quite a standard pattern in that this is for creating the block. It's not for creating the mini sample size, if you like. It's just for creating the block in the middle. So this one is the Facets of the Heart. And it's great for doing, you can do this nice rainbow effect, or you can do a lovely ombre effect. And I've got one in pinks, which I really, really love. And I'm really gutted I got on the plane to come over and I suddenly realized that I'd left it behind. So I'll post a picture of that one somewhere so you can see that. But that's fab. And you can use that as an individual block, incorporate that into a quilt, or you can use it on its own, or you could replicate that. Imagine that if you did 3 across and 3 down and you did them all in different ombre colours, it would look fabulous, or even all in the same colour, it would look really, really great. So you've got lots of different options for that one. Another one that we have in foundation paper piecing is the Kingfisher. I love Kingfishers. The colours on them are just absolutely beautiful. And they are a friend of the Kookaburra. I love that song. Me and the girls always sing it in the car. Kookaburra sits in the old gum tree. I won't do it now for you, don't panic. Don't panic. So we've got both of those patterns are available. I don't know if you've noticed or seen online, I also have my Nutcracker. Look at him. I love him. He is fab. So he's made with a combination of foundation paper piecing and traditional piecing techniques. So I've got the pattern with me, so I'll take you through the pattern as well. He's nice and big. It's to make a wall hanging, but as my youngest said, she would love it on her bed. And I thought, oh, you know what, that would be really nice. So what you could do is you just increase the size of these borders and you could make a bed-size quilt. Now, the pattern for this one, I thought I would show you, only because it's a slightly more involved pattern. The ones for things like the kingfisher and the heart are more of a standard pattern that include your pattern pieces and instructions for how to put it together. But because this one was a little bit bigger, it had sort of more to it, I figured I'd just hold your hand a little bit more. So within the pattern, you'll have, at the moment, it's only as a PDF download. So you can get that on my Etsy store or on my website. You can download those. Throughout the next 12 months, I'll see if I can get myself a paper pattern done as well. But for the time being, it's just a PDF download. So when you get the download, you've got 3 different documents that you'll get with that. You've got the main instructions, you've got your pattern pieces, and you've got your labels as well. Because there are so many different bits and pieces that you need to cut out, I've done all of the labels for you. The Nutcracker himself, I've divided him into several sections. So if I show you those on the pattern, we've got all your fabric requirements, you've got your colouring in diagram. But what I've done here is I have sort of sectioned him off into a hat section, the face, the body, and the lower half. And then I've colour-coded all of your cutting instructions here so that you can see when you're cutting out all of the little rectangles which part of the Nutcracker it is to keep you on track. So you can use your labels in conjunction with your cutting sizes, and I've also got diagrams as well to show you how to cut them all out. Okay, so you've got those for all your different colours. And you've also got, once you've done all your cutting out, you've got your pattern pieces here. So what you need to bear in mind is when you're printing off PDFs, and this is with any PDF that you print out, if it's important, the size of the pattern pieces that you're working with, make sure that you test printing out the pattern pieces. So here I've got a 1-inch test square. So print that page out first. Make sure that your printer settings are correct, and then you can print from there on in. So it's normally things like you print actual size rather than fit to page or scale or anything like that. You tend to just print actual size. So here on the instructions, it shows you all of the 13 different pages of the pattern pieces. And you can see on here that some of them are highlighted in grey, and these are the pattern pieces that are slightly larger than the rest of them. So they are across 2 different pages. So you'll see that you'll need to join page 1 and page 2 together in order to complete this piece here. But that's all on the other pattern pages. It tells you join this page to, so for example on here it says join with page 2 to complete hat A. So it guides you through that. So that will tell you join here with this one in order to create that top piece. Okay, so those are your pattern pieces. And then the instructions go on to help you how to pull together all of your different sections. So you would piece section A, piece section B, so on and so forth, and then you join all of those together, and that creates this hat group. So that's the top of his hat. And then you've got the same thing for all of the other different sections. And then I just wanted to show you at the back before we move on. I've got a picture at the back here of how he might look in different colours, because I've gone for red, which is quite a traditional colour, but doesn't he look fabulous in a purple? If you chose one of the really rich dark purples, I think he would look absolutely fabulous, and he'd look great in green or something as well. But Becky Alexander Frost, she has bought a copy of this pattern, and she says, we're going to hold her to it, she's going to make one in pink. She's going to make one in pink, and she's going to make the big one, and then she's going to put a small one either side. So we shall see. He looks so good. I love him. I love him. It's fab. And thank you so much for everyone that's already bought a copy of the pattern, and the feedback has been wonderful. So thank you so much. In terms of other patterns that I have got, this is the Penta Pinny pin cushion, which are these ones here. So these are an EPP project for making a pin cushion. So it's based on a pentagon at the top and the base. And they are absolutely super for using up your scraps. This one I used from the scraps of the Liberty Stars quilt that I did in Christmas in July, I think. So great for fussy cutting and great for using up scraps. great for making as gifts for people, or just make one for yourself. They're good fun. So in this one, we've got all the standard instructions on paper piecing and how I've constructed that, how it all comes together. And you've got all your pattern pieces. And I've included a 3/8 of an inch seam allowance on all of those so that you can actually use these both for your paper pieces, and you can trace them off and use them if you're looking to fussy cut, because that's quite nice on English paper piecing. Okay, so I've got that one again as a PDF download, but I have got a very small quantity of kits as well, where I have got these prints. Not very many of these prints left, sorry, excuse all the pins. I've got not many of those left, but I'll do some other colours as well. Okay, right, what else? Oh, the one behind me here, this is a forthcoming pattern. That will be out imminently, and this one is, looks like a little bit like a log cabin type design, but it's not. I've actually used a different construction technique in order to create this effect, because you can just do a couple of variations to create some really interesting different versions of the quilt or of those blocks. The pattern itself is going to come in 4 different sizes. So the one up on the wall is the throw size, and that one is 49.5 by nearly 60 inches wide. This one here is the wall hanging size. This one is just short of 20 inches square. And you can see on this one here, this is where I have taken the blocks, but I've rotated them and I've laid them out in a different way. So these are almost like a chasing type design. Really great in a monochrome or doing it's like an ombre type effect. So this pattern will come with 4 different sizes. This is, let's say, the smallest size. There's a size in between these two, and then there's a bigger one. And the bigger one is 69 inches by 89 inches. So that one is out imminently. A couple of other ones that are in the pipeline. We've got the one behind me here. Oh, I've gone the wrong way. Here we go. This is a combination of foundation paper piecing and just other techniques. So this is portholes and pinwheels. So these are inset into little portholes. So that one's on the drawing board at the moment. We're going to come to that one as the year progresses. Okay, and then a little sneaky peek at 2 other projects I'm working on. We've got this one here. I'll need to do a bit of tweaking on this one, but this is going to come out again in a variety of sizes, from this wall hanging size up to more of a single bed type size. And very, very quick sneaky peek at this one. Coming out for the summer, I have a range of beach huts. So I've got 3 different designs, and they'll come out as a set. So foundation paper piecing. Right, shall we have a talk about foundation paper piecing? See me as I've said that word 100 times since we've been here. The pattern that we're talking about today is this one that I first demonstrated on Sewing Quarter. I think it was in April 2017. Crikey, it was a jolly long time ago. But also feels like yesterday. Time is a funny thing. So what I've done is I've tweaked the pattern a little bit. I've made the spools a little shorter and a little squatter, just to try and make the measurements work a little bit. So, but we'll have the pattern for that. It would just be for this small size. And I think some people just worry and think, well, you know, why do you want to make a quilt that's this small? But actually having a mini quilt is brilliant, because it gives you an opportunity to use your scraps. It's a quick and easy project. It could be something that you're doing for a swap as a small gift, but it also gives you the opportunity to practice those new skills. If you've not done foundation paper piecing before, it's a brilliant thing to do, just to start small. It also gives you an opportunity to practice your either walking foot quilting or your free motion quilting, because you're dealing with something a lot smaller, to try and get a really big quilt under your machine for the first time that you're doing free motion quilting is really difficult. So start with something small. Right, so this pattern will come with your standard fabric requirements. We'll have a colouring in diagram for you so that you can plan your fabrics. I've also got your cutting instructions. So I've based this on fat quarters. You'll need a fat quarter for your background fabric, and that will cover off all your sashing strips, all the little pieces between. You'll then need another fat quarter for the tops and bottoms of each of the spools. But what you can do is, if you're careful with your fabric, you can also get the binding and the tops and bottoms of the spools from the same fat quarter. So if you're going to do that and you decide that you want to do both, I would cut your binding first, and I think from memory you'll need four strips across a fat quarter to join, and then you can use the balance to do these little end pieces. You then need small pieces of prints, and you might want to do the same print 9 times over. You might want to do more spools or less spools, or some of every scrap that you've got in your stash. But each of those you'll need something like 3 inches by 2.5 inches worth of print for each of the spools. We then have all your pattern pieces here to cut out, and then we've got construction diagrams here to show you how to pull everything together. Okay, right, so first of all you'd start off with your pattern pieces, and the spool is made up of 3 sections. You've got your middle section, here's one here, a finished one. So your spool is made up of those 3 sections. You've got section A, which is the coloured print and 2 background pieces. And then you've got sections A and B, B and C, which are exactly the same as each other. They're just flipped over to create the top and the bottom. So those are your 3 different sections. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at how you might do your foundation paper piecing. And there are a couple of different methods, but I'm going to show you the method that I'm most comfortable with and what works for me. Oh, I've just realised, I'm really sorry, I don't have a cutting mat. I'm really sorry. We'll get one of those. Because I suddenly looked at this table and went, oh my word, I don't want to cut the table. So the pattern pieces, once you've cut those out, you just need to, what I like to do is I like to fold along these lines. So I'll just, now some people like to do that as they go, but I like to do that. Thank you for the cutting mat, sorry, all a hoo-ha. Oh, pop that under here. And my pattern piece. So I've folded that. So even when I'm doing any foundation paper piecing, I find it's easier if I fold first rather than later in the stage. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing for piece B and for piece C. So I'm just going to fold those along those solid lines. And folding along that line, and then folding along that last line. So that's ready to go, and then we'll do the final one. So you might like to do these, you might like to sit and just do all the folding all in one go, or you might want to just do them as you get to them. And when you're doing something like this, you might do all the central sections first and then come back and do the tops and bottoms, or you might want to do one spool at a time because it's quite nice to see things come together. Okay. So we're going to start off with this piece first because this is the most simple piece that we have. It's only got 3 pieces. So this is section A, and you've got piece 1, piece 2, and piece 3. Always start with number 1 and follow the numbers in order. So for this one, we want the print for section number 1. And for that, we're going to take the print fabric. It doesn't have to be print fabric, it can be plain. But one thing that you've got to bear in mind when you're starting foundation paper piecing is that the very first piece that you use, you need to place face down to the back of the pattern piece. You've got 2 different options. You can either glue it in place or you can use a pin, whatever you're most comfortable with, but I quite like just a dab of glue. That's enough for me. So I'll do a little dab of glue on the back, and I'm going to place that on top of the reverse of my fabric. What I need to bear in mind is that the fabric is placed centrally underneath and allows me at least 1/4 inch around all of the outside edges. So I'm going to place that there. Oh, and I've done that back to front. Sorry, I'm not paying attention. I've glued myself. Not very clever. And then from there, what I'm going to do is I'm going to just trim that seam allowance to make sure it's nice and straight. That just helps me with the next stage. So I'm going to go, this is piece number 1 on the underside. I'm now going to go for piece number 2. So I'm going to fold back along that line. And for me, that's easy to do because I've already pre-creased that. So that's a nice, easy fold. I'm then going to get my add a quarter ruler. And if you're a long time viewer of Sewing Quarter, you will have seen these used before. And these are a ruler. Mine's slightly different to the one that we've been selling on Sewing Quarter. Mine's a little bit narrower. But you can see this little lip here. And that little step there just butts up against this piece of paper. And then what you can do is you just trim off the excess fabric here. And what that does is that allows you to create a perfect 1/4 of an inch seam allowance along this edge. So now what you can do is you take your next piece of fabric, and from here on in, so no matter how big your block is that you're creating, or the section is that you're creating, your next piece of fabric is right side up. Everything else is right side up. So we've got a rectangle here, and the size for this rectangle is included in the pattern, so you've got that information. And I'm going to place that raw edge that we've just cut there onto the right side of your fabric here, because it's folded back and you're all set to go. From here, what you can do is you can just take it to the machine and stitch. If you're not comfortable, take a pin and you can go through the paper just to hold it in place. That's entirely up to you. When we are stitching, what you're doing is you're stitching on the solid line on the pattern piece. But what we're doing is we're going to sew with a shorter stitch length. The shorter stitch length will allow you to effectively perforate the paper so that it means that you can take the papers out later, because you leave the papers in during construction, but you take them out obviously in your finished article. So we're going to sew along that line. We're not sewing either side of the line, we're just sewing on the line. Okay. So you can see here we've sewn on the line between piece number 1 and piece number 2, and showing you that on the reverse along that edge. Okay, so then what we do is we flip this over, and you can either press that with an iron or you can finger press, that's up to you. I'll just finger press for today. And then we need to do the next piece. So we're now going to move on to A3. So again, we're going to flip back. We're going to go fold over on that line that we pre-folded, place our add a quarter ruler, trim off that edge. That just means that you're reducing the amount of bulk, because you can see here I've only taken off a really tiny sliver. But actually when you're doing more complicated blocks, so things like the Kingfisher, who I've lost, I'll bring him over. When you're looking at more complicated blocks, so you're looking at things like here around his eye area, you don't want to leave too much fabric on the inside because this gets really, really bulky. So you can use your add a quarter ruler to reduce that bulk. And actually they do make add an 1/8 rulers as well for really intricate work where you really do need to reduce that bulk. So now we're placing the next piece of fabric, again, right sides up, and we're going to place that against the straight edge. And I'm not going to pin this time, I'm going to take it over. When you come over, if you're not pinning, just make sure that when you come to place this underneath the foot, that this piece of fabric here doesn't accidentally fold under. I don't want to tell you how many times I've done that, but you think I would learn. I'm going to fold that piece of paper over, needle down, and off we go. Okay, and then again we can finger press, and that's your section A all pieced. So from here we then can trim your piece, and on your pattern pieces you've got the solid lines, and the solid lines are always the stitching lines, and then we've got dotted lines here which are the outside edges. So this is your 1/4 of an inch. So now what I need to do is trim away all of this excess. So I'll just use a standard ruler. If you've got a rotating cutting mat, that's always quite handy. But we just use this one for today. So the nice thing to do is, if you're doing this at home, is to create yourself a little bit of a station, because what you'll find is that you are constantly sewing, cutting and pressing. And if you don't have your ironing board and your cutting mat close to your sewing machine, you'll end up standing up and down and moving all around all the time, and you'll drive yourself a bit crazy. And the whole process takes a lot longer. So if you can get yourself a situation where you are you're sewing and maybe you're pressing and cutting next to you, maybe you've got a wool pressing mat, that's really handy to have. So maybe a wool pressing mat and a rotating cutting mat, a small mat, then I think you're away. That's really handy to have. So here we go, here's section A. So that's the middle part of your spool. Okay. Right, so let's have a look at sections B and C. These are the tops and bottoms of the spools. These are a little bit more complicated in that they've just got more pieces, but you're following exactly the same routine. So you've got your piece number one, and let's do two pieces at the same time. So piece number one on B is at the bottom, and piece number one on C is at the top. So I'm just going to run a slick of glue along those. I'm going to place those on the fabric. So if you're more comfortable with foundation paper piecing, what you can do is you don't have to cut these rectangles of fabric. What you can do is you can work from a much bigger piece, and you can just piece from a fat quarter or something and trim as you go. And for me, I'm more comfortable doing it that way because for me, I think it uses a lot less fabric. There's a lot less wastage. But if you are new to it, then absolutely start with the rectangles. So we're now pressing on that, oh no, we're sewing 1 to 2. So we're folding back on the line between 1 and 2. And we're trimming. And that gives us a guide and a straight edge for the piece for number 2, which is a slightly different size rectangle. And we're going to place that again on that cut edge. So what you're making sure is that the piece of fabric underneath completely covers the piece of fabric, the paper on the top, and allows you that 1/4 inch. Okay. So if you've got a light box, that can be quite useful for just checking fabrics, or hold it up against a light. I quite like using my my light box. Ages ago, we used to have on Sewing Quarter some clear cutting mats. So if you've got one of those, you can try putting that on top of your light box. Okay, so I'm going to do both of these at the same time. And we're going to sew through the seam allowance on the outside and along the line between piece 1 and piece number 2. I'm going to do both at the same time. Again, make sure that that little piece doesn't fold underneath, because I mentioned about doing that shorter seam allowance, the shorter stitch length. If you do make a mistake, undoing it is a right pain in the proverbial. So if you can avoid making mistakes, then that's a bit of a bonus. But if you do, and it's only a little piece, actually what I like to do is just start again, just print out a new piece and start again. So those are pieces number 2 attached. We're now going to go to the other side of the pattern piece and do piece number 3. So we'll fold back. I'm going to trim, because if you didn't trim, you'd find it more difficult to understand where this piece of fabric needs to sit to try and get that in the right place. So by trimming that seam allowance first, that gives you a nice definite edge for where that needs to go. Again, right sides up. And just bear in mind, if you're using something like this, I'm using a linear, and you're sewing in a room with not much light, just be doubly careful that your fabric's the right way up. Because I sewed one once with a fabric like that, and I then saw it in the daylight and realised that half the pieces I'd sewn the wrong way around. Not very clever. Okay, so I'm going to pop that on top of that one, and I'm going to sew both of those as well. Okay, flip that fabric, the piece of paper over, check the fabric hasn't flipped under, and we're sewing on the line directly between piece number 1 and piece number 3, because it's the other side. Okay, and we'll do the next one. Okay. Okay, so press those back, and again, like I say, you can finger press these. You might have a little seam roller, or you might want to use the iron. Okay, so now we just need to do the final pieces. So again, I'm going to flip it over. I'm going to press back again against that line that we pre-pressed before. Fold it back. We're going to trim that seam allowance using our add a quarter ruler. And we'll do the other piece as well. Okay. Here we go. And don't forget, this pattern is available. It's free of charge, but I am conning you by asking you to sign up for my newsletter. And as I mentioned, if you've already signed up to my newsletter and you'd like a copy of the pattern, just drop me a line and I'll send it across to you. Oh, here's the details for you. So there's my website details. There's a sign-up form on there, or on Facebook. There's a sign-up form on there as well. There is no excuse for not finding me. You track me down. Track me down. And if you follow along on Instagram, I'm also doing, or to be honest, I'm posting on Facebook and Instagram, is I'm doing some videos. So on a Friday, I'm sort of starting to try and do just a general chit chat and catch up on what I'm up to, because at the end of the day, we're all really nosy. So I'm just updating you on generally what I'm up to. And then maybe once a week, once every 10 days, I'm doing a video tutorial. And the tutorials I'm loading on YouTube. So just have a look on YouTube, subscribe, and then you'll keep up to date with when they're being launched. But I'm just covering off, I'll be doing some foundation paper piecing as well, but just basic quilting techniques, sewing techniques, and just some nice tips and bits and pieces along the way. Right, so I'm now sewing along that line between number 1 and number 4, just following the numbers in order. And we'll do the last one, and then we can trim these. Just remember when you finish your foundation paper piecing project, remember to change your needle. Because you're sewing through paper, it will end up really, really blunt. So just make sure that you remember to do that, because you'll get to your next project and think, oh my word, what on earth is going on? So we'll then press those away. And that is finished, bar the trimming. Okay. We'll look at that. Okay, and then we'll trim those down. Again, trim on the outside of that, or along where the dotted line was, just to get rid of that excess. Oh. Come on. Come on. Should have treated myself to a new blade. Okay, so there's one part of the spool here, and then the other one, I just need to finger press that back open. You could use a bit of starch if you like, best press, whatever you've got. So these are your 3 different sections. And then we need to get to the next point, is joining your sections together. And there's a diagram in case you get lost, or upside down and back to front. And I joke about being back to front. I taught someone how to do foundation paper piecing, and she got it. She really got it, and she understood it. She loved it. And I set her some homework, and she went away, and she came back, and she'd done the whole thing back to front. And I've got no idea how she's done that, but it is easy to get lost. But just remember to have your printed pattern pieces facing upwards and your prints facing upwards, and you should be okay. Okay, so here's the 3 different sections for your spool, and now we need to join those together. So as you can see on this piece here, there's a, sometimes in foundation paper piecing it doesn't matter too much how you join your pieces together, but on things like this there are certain places where you want those to be exact where they join. So have a look at the pattern, see where the lines intersect, and then that will give you a guide. On this one, what we need to do is we need to join, and let me get a pen so I can show you. On here, we're joining this junction, or these junctions even, with these little junctions here. So those are the points that we need to match. So the way that I do that is I will stick pins through that point and just make sure that they're coming through on the other side at that exact point between the two. So I'll do that on this one. Oh, I need to go a little bit to the left. And that's partially because I'm only finger pressing and I'm not pressing with the iron. And then I'm going to stick a pin through these ones as well, on that junction, and this one, through that hole. Then what you do is you can, I take the pins out of this side and I will poke this pin in where this one comes out. So I'm going to take this one out, and then I'm going to poke that in that little hole. And then I'm going to take the next pin out and poke that one in, that hole where that one's come out. Now, in theory, they should just match up anyway, but sometimes you can accidentally go a little bit skew-if. So that just gives you your belt and braces way of trying to make sure that you're going to be as accurate as possible on those seam junctions. And when you're dealing with pieces that aren't necessarily the same width as each other, things like the heart or the kingfisher, sometimes it's a bit less clear as to exactly which point you're matching up. So use that pin method to try and identify those junctions. Now obviously you're not going to be able to get through the machine like this because your pins are sticking out. So this is where I'll use my sewing clips. You can use a pin, and these yellow glass headed pins are quite good because they're long and they're strong, but I still don't like it too much because by the time you've put your pin through and back out again, it can quite easily disrupt the fabric and just move things along a couple of millimeters. So I'll use good strong sewing clips instead. I'll use a number of those. And just make sure these are perpendicular. Whoop, and do that the right way up. And then you can take your pins out and take it across to the sewing machine. If you're sewing sections together that are a little bit tricky and you're not really sure whether you've got it right or not, I tend to increase the stitch length on the machine so that you can stitch it, check that you're okay, and then if you are, you can go back again and stitch it a little bit closer together. That's just a good fail-safe way of just checking. But we probably don't have time today, so I'm just going to wing it and go for it. Throw caution to the wind. Again, you're sewing along that solid line from one end to the other. Taking your clips out as you go. Okay, so that's one end, give it a finger press. So that's the bottom half. Oh, it looks lovely. These are Alison glass prints, they're fabulous. They're really lovely. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. Stick the pins in that junction and stick the pins in the other junction to match up. Oh, a bit too far to the left. And on the other side. Oh. Okay, and then we're going to poke those in. One pin out and the other one through. And on this side, one out and one through. And again, take the sewing clips, pin in, or clip in place rather. Okie dokes. Right, we'll whiz this through the machine. Oh, lost my pot. Along that line, take your sewing clips out as you go. Okay, And then from here, you give that a nice press, and I am suggesting that you press these, the spool ends towards the middle of the spool. Okay, so a bit of a finger press. Then once you've created 9 of those, you can then join them together to create your whole little wall hanging. I've got several here that I've already joined on together. Before you start, have a bit of a think about how you would like your fabrics laid out, and do something like take a photograph or make a note on the colouring diagram, or do something just to help you remember what order you're going to put things together in. Once you've pieced all of them together, you can then join them together in rows, and all that information is in the instructions. So I've got some diagrams for you. So you're going to take 3 of these and you're going to join them together. You've got some rectangles in the middle to join them into rows, and then you're going to join those rows together with some sashing strips, which I've obviously not brought with me, so you're going to have to, oh no, look, it's already attached. I know what I'm doing, I promise, a consummate professional, I know totally what I'm doing. So we join those together in rows. Now, you've got a choice. You can take out all of your papers at this point, or you can leave them in whilst you add in these rectangles on the sides. If you're going to leave your papers in, what you need to do is you need to have a think about removing some of the paper in here, because you've got to think that this rectangle is going to be sewn over the top of these, but you've got little bits of paper underneath if you've pressed the seam to one side, and that paper will be the bane of your life trying to get that out once you've sewn that onto this rectangle. So you might want to take out all of your papers first, or you might just want to take out these small pieces. But removing the papers from foundation paper piecing is 90% of the time really satisfying and really simple. Because you've used that shorter stitch length, you can just fold the paper back and it just comes away. It's really simple. It does get a little bit trickier with smaller pieces, but if you struggle, use a little pair of tweezers. If you've got an overlocker, you'll quite often have some tweezers, or just use the ones you use for your eyebrows, and pull those bits out, or you can just give it a little squirt of some water just to dampen it a little bit, and then those will easily come out. So that's quite satisfying. That's quite nice to just sit and pull out all of those papers. Quite satisfying doing that with a Nutcracker. Okay, so that's your foundation paper piecing. I hope that's been really useful for you. Like I say, if you've got any questions, let me know. I'm always more than happy to answer any questions you've got. But that's a fun project, I like it. It's just a nice gift to make for someone, or a way of decorating your sewing room or something. Or you could use the spools and you can add them onto a different project, add them onto a bag, or incorporate them into something else. There we go. Okay. Oh, come back this way a bit. Oh, that way. There we go. So this one, like I say, this one's available free when you sign up for my newsletter, and that'll just be an instant download. It will just come straight to you. Other than that, if you want to buy any of my patterns, they are available on my not my Facebook page. That's where I witter on about sewing stuff, on my website, or you can buy via Etsy, but not everyone's comfortable with Etsy, so I've got 2 different choices for you. But keep in touch. I'm quite sociable and I like chatting about sewing and stuff. So yeah, just keep in touch, and subscribe to YouTube, because that's just a great way of keeping up to date with my demonstrations and sharing knowledge about stuff. And if you've got any requests, let me know. Contact details are coming up for you. Have a look on Facebook or on Instagram. Okay, and just finally, don't forget, if you fancy a little trip to France with Stitchtopia, book in time for, I think it was the 10th of January that you need to do that. But thank you very much. I've absolutely loved being on Sewing Quarter. Thank you so much for everything, and I will see you online soon.